All right, welcome back to the Florida Football Insiders podcast. This is our debut edition. Appreciate you finding us on all of your podcast platforms. And we are going to start off the podcast talking Florida State Seminoles. And we have Matt Murschel. Matt's been with the Orlando Sentinel for 18 years. He's also covered the Notre Dame Fighting Irish for numerous years as well. So he is very well versed in the college football world. And Matt is the primary beat reporter Florida State for the Orlando Sentinel. And welcome to the podcast, Matt.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Jason. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. We got a great college football season ready to kick off this weekend. Florida State kicks off with Duquesne at home on over the weekend. So, and they got a big one coming up with LSU in about a week and a half. So we got lots to talk about. We're gonna break down the Florida State roster a little bit first, but before we do that, we got a couple coaching changes. Remember, Florida State was 5-7 in 2021, 4-4 in the ACC. This is Coach Mike Norvell's third year in charge in Tallahassee. A couple changes on the coach staff. They lose Kenny Dillingham to Oregon to go with Dan Lanning up as the OC. What tell us who the replacement at OC is for Florida State?
Well, it's Alex Atkins. Really, Mike Norvell didn't have to look very far. He just really kind of added the additional title of OC, to Atkins, who was the offensive line coach. Atkins had previously been an OC at his time at Charlotte, so we kind of understood the idea of what's going on. I mean, let's listen. Mike Norvell's probably going to be the primary play caller in this offense. We've known that the last couple of years, but I think Atkins' job really is to kind of be that voice on Norvell's shoulder, maybe to help out, throw out some ideas. He's got a good understanding of the offense, obviously being in charge of the offensive line, knows what they can handle, what they can't handle. So it's an interesting move. I think Atkins is a good hire for them. I think it kind of helps make the transition very smooth, especially when you're looking for how they played last year and what they expect from this year. If you bring in a whole new offensive coordinator, I think it might have made the transition a little bit more difficult. But Atkins is a very confident guy. The players really love him. They really enjoyed playing for him. So I think it was the right move for Novel.
Any other significant changes on the coaching staff?
Well, they brought in Randy Shannon, or they promoted Randy Shannon, who used to be the defensive coordinator at UCF the last couple of years, was previously at Miami. I think Randy's been at almost every school here in the state of Florida. Yeah. He was at Florida at one point. He was was at Miami, obviously. So Randy's now the linebackers coach. I think that was a smart move from their part as well. He was a defensive analyst last year. I think obviously it's an easy transition for him to come in there. They bring in a guy in Tatum Bethune who ironically played for Randy at UCF. So that kind of helped maybe, I guess, in the process of help them landing a transfer player. I think Tatum really liked playing for Randy. Is one of the reasons why he transferred. And I think, the linebackers all, again, another coaching addition that really I think the players embrace. They really like playing for him. And I think it's going to help them out in the long run. Listen, they've got a talented linebackers group. They've got some experience there as well. And Randy's got obviously a generational knowledge of that position. I think it's going to help them out as well.
Yeah, and I think with the recruiting as well, he's so familiar with the state of Florida. He's been all over the place. He's recruited all around the Southeast, so that'll help them in whether it's high schools or in the transfer portal and all that stuff. So Shannon's got a wealth of knowledge and experience, especially in the state of Florida coaching. All right, let's go to the offense. Jordan Travis seems to be the entrenched starter, no doubt about it. Talk about the issues that Florida State has had over the years. Has been an offensive line. Seems like the last 7 or 8 years, minimum offensive line issues. Have they been able to address that at all? Is that just more of a talent upgrade, scheme changes? How is Florida State looking to address those line issues?
Well, I think the biggest thing they did is they actually made it a focus for the last couple of years. I think Mike Norvell, when he arrived, realized they were woefully disappointing on the offensive line. They were the worst in the country. And I think one of the things he did was said, let's focus on that group. And, they went out to the transfer portal. They added more than a handful of players from the transfer portal to help beef up that line. Over the last couple of years, they've been recruiting really hard. They brought in, I think it was 6 freshman offensive linemen in this past recruiting class, all talented guys. I think this is huge for them. I think they've started to develop some depth there. They brought in a guy like Dylan Gibbons last year. He was a transfer. He's been huge for them, kind of helped solidify that line a little bit. This past season, they brought in Demetrius Emmanuel, Jaston Turnitine, Bless Harris. They had a guy in Caden Lyles who was supposed to help them out as well. He got hurt, though, is going to be out for the rest of the season. But, again, this is a line that was young, that has got a lot of, but has added this transfer experience, which I think will help them out. I think the young guys will eventually see some of the action here as well. Julian Armilia, who's a really talented freshman coming in. I think he's a guy I expect to see maybe get some snaps on the offensive line, whether it's the second team or whatever. But again, this is a group now that's got some experience, has worked well together. As long as they stay healthy, and that's been a concern over the last couple of years, I think this offensive line will play a lot better than it has in the past.
And are they sold on Jordan Travis as being the clear number one, that it's his team?
Yeah, exactly. I think that was not that there was anything wrong with last year when Mackenzie Milton came in, and I think they needed Mackenzie Milton. I think Mackenzie Milton brought a calming presence in that locker room. I think he was helped Jordan Travis take that next step to maybe elevate himself. And so when Travis comes in this year, there's just so much confidence coming out of this kid now. I mean, last year I think he was a little bit hesitant at times. Now he's got the confidence. He knows he's the leader. He's the voice of the offense. I think the other quarterbacks understand that. He's had obviously an up and down type of career. He's been banged up. He was banged up a little bit last year. Now he comes in really healthy. The coaching staff has said he's looked great. I think he's completed they said 70% of his passes in preseason camp. I think it's his offense. And I think once you have that kind of established and that confidence and the players buy into that, and you surround him with a better offensive line and some better weapons around him, I think that's also going to help Jordan Travis become a better quarterback.
All right, let's go to the skill players. I mean, the Florida State teams of yesteryear that were dominant and were devastating always had unbelievable receivers, a good tight end, an electric running back, especially at wide receiver in the last several years. You've not seen that electric guy, that All-American kind of candidate. Do you see anybody on that roster that can develop into that?
Yeah, I do. Johnny Wilson, who's a transfer from Arizona State, 6'7", really tall guy, lanky guy. I've signed a couple practices, just some brief moments here or there. And this kid can really, he's got coaches excited, and he can reach up and make the kind of catches that maybe they've been looking for. He's explosive. I mean, a guy I think that they believe can really kind of be a key piece of what they're trying to do. I think another a transfer that will stand out to keep an eye on is Micah Pittman, a kid who came in from Oregon.
Yes.
He's got a lot of talent on that. He can be used as a returner as well in their kick game. So I think that's a big piece that they've been lacking, over the last couple of years. So I think Micah Pittman is going to be a guy. I think obviously you're going to see Johnny and Ja'Kai Douglas, who we saw a little bit of last year, make some big plays here and there. He's kind of guy they use in the backfield sometimes. They bring him out a lot of times on slot. I expect Ja'Kai Douglas to get some big looks as well. So this is the first time since Mike Norvell's taken over. They've got a pretty talented group of receivers. It's just which of these guys is going to step up and start making the plays. They need these guys to come in there and start being regular contributors. Deuce Spann is another transfer they brought in who's making the transition from quarterback to receiver. They really like what he did. I saw him a couple times. He looks good as well. They need those guys to step up because really they can't put the onus of the offense on Jordan Travis's shoulder. They got to have other guys to step up.
Yeah. All right. You listen to the Florida Football Insiders. We're with Matt Murschel from the Orlando Sentinel. We're previewing Florida State. We're hitting. We just reviewed the offense. Let's go to special teams before we go to defense. Talk about the kicking game a little bit. I'm a former kicker. You and I didn't talk about this, but I actually played at Florida State way back in the day as a place kicker. So special teams are important to me. Talk about the special teams, punter kicker situation.
Yeah, I think they're pretty solid in this spot. I mean, that's one of the things that they have to look forward to. Ryan Fitzgerald comes back. Obviously they're looking to get solid performance out of him. Alex Mastromato, comes back as punter. Again, Australian punter. He's one of all those Australian punters. They're kind of crazy guys. He's got platinum blonde hair now. I think he dyed his hair over the camp. He looks like a guy who can really kind of make some plays. I think the kicking wise, I think they look better. They look solid. To me, as I mentioned before, it's going to be that return game. They need to have some explosive return guys. I mean, if they can have a guy who can bust out the occasional, 50, 60 yard, return, I think that only helps this offense along. I think, and I think that's something that Mike Norvell addressed early on in camp is that they've got to find these kind of playmakers. And they understand that special teams are going to be a key part of this team needs to do because there are going to be times when they're not going to be able to score, maybe get in the end zone. They got to get field goals. They got to get points. They can't waste opportunities.
Yes.
So I think that's where the kicking game is really going to be a crucial element for them as well. And they understand that. I think Mike Norvell's not just throwing that aside. I think he realizes they have to be really kind of on point this year.
All right, let's go to the defense. You mentioned the linebacking core. That seems like that's the strength. Talk about the linebacking core and how important that's going to be to the defensive line and secondary.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big part of it. Listen, especially when you think about Jermaine Johnson,
Right.
is gone. So they lose that kind of dominant pass rusher. I think that middle of the defense is going to be key for them. Mentioned Tatum Bethune coming in. I think he's a spark plug. He's a guy I've covered at times when he was at UCF. He's really he's a quiet, unassuming guy, but everyone talks about how his leadership in the locker room has been great. He's a guy I think could really step up and be a big piece of what they're trying to do. Amari Gainer's had a strong camp. They like what he's done last year. Kalen DeLoach is coming back. They feel like he's a guy that can continue to make plays as a starter. DJ Lundy was there. I think a guy that's going to be interesting and fans should keep an eye on this year is Omar Graham Jr. He's a guy that brought in as a freshman. He's someone that the coaches have talked a lot about. Said he's really kind of excelled. See maybe some opportunities to get him on the field. It's tough because they've got so many players in that spot. You got to get these guys in, but I think you'll see a little bit more of him. I like the linebacker group. This is probably one of the better linebacker groups they've had in a couple of years. And I think as long as they stay healthy, I think there's opportunities for them to stand out.
Secondary wise, obviously the game is evolved in such a passing game, and you got to have probably 4 to 5 really good corners, or at least serviceable corners and safeties. Do you think there's enough depth there? Are they young? Give us an overview of the secondary.
Yeah, I think they're young. This is one of the positions I'd be a little bit concerned about going into this year. I mean, listen, Jamie Robinson obviously is a talented player. He's a talented safety, the All-America, the All-ACC player. Got votes for that. I think he's going to be obviously the captain of the secondary. He's a guy that's really going to step up. But they've got some guys that could also can be big playmakers, but need to step up as well. Jarquez McMillan comes in. He was a guy that they brought in as a transfer. They expect to see a little bit more of him. Jarian Jones has had a good camp. I think he's another one that could step up and make some plays. What I'm really kind of interested in, there's a pair of freshmen they brought in, and I think this is going to be the group that I think people should keep an eye on. Sam McCall obviously was one of the higher signees they got from this past class, and Azaria Thomas. Both those two guys are really outstanding. They've had good camps. I think they're both opportunities to maybe make their way into the starting lineup at some point. And they're guys that are big playmakers. These are the kind of players that Florida State is used to getting in the past. They haven't gotten over the last couple of years. So as long as they continue to get these guys and can showcase what they can do, I think it's only going to help them out in the long run.
All right, let's go to the schedule. You got an interesting start. You got Duquesne this weekend, but the big one is LSU September 4th in New Orleans. It's a de facto road game. You got Brian Kelly's first game as head coach at LSU. Will be a tough environment, obviously, in New Orleans. It'll be a very pro LSU crowd. A winnable game, but probably they'll be an underdog, but it's a winnable game potentially. Then you go to Louisville on the 16th after a bye week. Couple games you got to win, in my opinion. You got to beat Boston College. The issue with Florida State the last couple of years are the games you have to win, the 50-50 kind of games. They've been losing most of them. So for this schedule to turn out to be a good record, you got to win some of these 50-50 games, and you got to win the games you're supposed to win. You should beat Boston College at home. You can't lose to that game. October 1, you get Wake Forest. You may or may not have to see Sam Hartman. So that could potentially be a winnable game depending on what the situation with Sam Hartman is. Big games back-to-back. You got NC State, Clemson back-to-back in October. Probably not going to win, again, maybe the NC State game, maybe, but probably not going to beat Clemson. Georgia Tech the following late October. Then you got Miami November 5th, Syracuse November 12th, Louisiana the 19th. Where in this schedule do you see, again, back to the winnable games? You got to win the games you're supposed to win, especially at home. So Florida State's not been a great home team the last several years either. Do you see an opportunity for them to, again, you got Clemson, NC State, Miami, and Florida are kind of the 4 big ones after LSU. How do you see the schedule laying out?
Well, I think for them, what's going to be important is that early part of the schedule. I think you mentioned Louisville, Boston College, even Wake Forest. I think those are games that really they have to really take advantage of that. They have to find a way to win those games because it is going to be a brutal start to October. Wake is, if Sam Hartman's back, Wake could be a different team. I mean, right. Obviously him not being around changes the complexity of how that team looks. I think at NC State's a tough game for them. Listen, NC State's probably going to be one of the favorites in the ACC outside of Clemson. So you got to find a way to win on the road there as well. They haven't really done a great job doing that. And then you mentioned Clemson comes to town, and if Clemson looks like the Clemson of the past, if they return like they look like, it's going to be a tough game for them to try to find a way to win it. Then you get Georgia Tech, which I think again you can hopefully get a win out of that, and then that road game at Miami, which we know is going to be a tough game because of what's going on with Mario Cristobal coming in. Obviously, Miami fans are, and Miami is all too familiar what happened last year, so they want to make that come out with a win. So if somehow they come out, if Florida State can beat Miami, I mean, there's a stretch there where you could win maybe 4 straight games going into that
Yes.
Florida game, and that
Yes.
would be a huge help for them, going into that Florida game. And we don't know how Florida's going to be. Listen, I have a little bit seen what they've done. I mean, this is a Florida team that they could be, they have an opportunity to maybe win 8 games, or they could be 5-7, depending on how things go, because it's going to have difficulty to schedule there. So I think there's opportunities for Florida State late in the schedule. But I also think early on, I think that Louisville, Louisville, Boston College, Wake Forest, as you mentioned, I think that's a stretch right there where you get some games there. Maybe you're 4-1, going into the heart of your schedule. Then maybe that kind of helps you build a little momentum. The thing that hurt them last year, that 0-4 start, it really kind of, and it set everything spiraling, and they were able to bounce back and win 5, to win 5 games, but it really could have been, if they'd started a little bit better. I mean, I think that momentum and that confidence would have carried them a little bit for better opportunities. This is still a team I think can get to be a bowl eligible team, maybe get to 8 wins. Again, it's just going to have to depend on if they can stay healthy and they can surprise some teams. Listen, LSU's a game they're going to be an underdog, as you mentioned, but I still think, again, they're already going to have a game under their belt. If they're healthy going into that game, they could surprise the Tigers because they're going to get some of the kinks out early on that LSU is not going to be able to get done.
And Florida State will bring some fans there. That's not a terrible drive. So there'll be some Florida State people there for sure. Obviously, you got the hype with the first game with Brian Kelly in New Orleans, but again, they'll be an underdog, but it's not a landslide underdog. They'll be a probably 4 or 5 point underdog. It's a winnable game for sure.
Yeah. Very much. And as you mentioned, the Florida State fans will be there. They've already sold out their allotment of tickets. I spoke to the Sugar Bowl people. They said, listen, they expect it to be close to a sellout, if not a sellout. It's going to be a great crowd. And if you're Florida State and Mike Norvell, you haven't had these type of games under you. You need this type of atmosphere to show these kids this is the kind of games that Florida State's used to playing.
Absolutely. It's Sunday night, a Labor Day weekend. It'll be a national TV game, so there'll be a lot of hype and a lot of eyes on the screen. Talk about the fan base. Is the fan base getting antsy with Norvell? What is the sentiment about the fan base and just the apathy of the program kind of thing moving into year 3?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag right now with the fan base. I think there's some who want to see, obviously, they believe that Florida State should be back to where it was, back when you were contending for national championships. They're looking at the recruiting classes. They're not, as like Florida State used to have back in the day. I think it's a lot more difficult recruiting-wise for Mike Norvell. Listen, you got Billy Napier now. You got Mario Cristobal. You've got Gus Malzahn, even at UCF, who's really kind of done a great job of recruiting. It's not like it used to be where you can just grab these kids. I think winning will help some of that, and that's where if you beat an LSU on the road, in New Orleans, I think that could help you recruiting. Right now they've got I think it's a top 20 class. If they can have some success this year, that class is going to get better. So recruiting is going to help them out a little bit. Winning is going to help ease some of the fan base as well. If they can get to 7 or 8 wins, I think FSU fans will feel a little bit better. Now, if they get something happens, like they finish 6-6 or they go 5-7 again, I'm not sure how long Mike Norvell will have. I mean, I think fans will start to turn on that a little bit. It's an important time in college athletics with NIL and everything like that going on. And if you've got fans now who are thinking, why am I going to give money to get these kind of players if I've got a coach that I don't believe in? It's going to be difficult for them. But as I've said, if you keep, this is what's hurt Florida State in the last couple of years, is if you keep making coaching changes, you're only going to put the program back farther and farther. I mean, I know people love the idea of Deion Sanders someday coming in and coaching, but I mean, if you keep making these changes, I mean, it's hard to build some stability. I think opening up their new practice facility or their new football operations building, in December when they're going to start up, I think that's going to help things along as well. So they're there. It's just the fan base just isn't sure exactly what to expect out of this program.
Yeah, if they struggle, you will hear a lot of Deion Sanders chatter here early in the season if they struggle early for sure. But all right, Matt, well, I appreciate the great insight. Tell everybody where they can find you online and find your work.
Yeah, they can go to orlandosentinel.com to find the latest, or they can follow me on Twitter at @OSMattMurschel.
Great job, Matt. Like I said, we'll be back in touch with you as the season moves forward. Tallahassee, we need to get Tallahassee back on the map of the national chatter amongst things. Because again, it's an interesting year in state of Florida with as much coaching turnover with Cristobal and Napier going to Florida and Miami. Obviously, a big transitional year here for Norvell. So there'll be lots of storylines to talk about here within the state of Florida, and that's what we're here to do on the Florida Football Insiders. And Matt, appreciate your help, and we'll definitely be reaching out to you as we move through the season.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Have a great week, Matt, and we will be right back.